Jrue Holiday trade rumors are heating up as we get deeper and deeper into the 2025 NBA offseason. You're watching Celtics Today by Chat Sports. I am your host, Tyler Smith. And on today's show, a new suitor has emerged in the Jrue Holiday trade cycle. Boston has to clean up their salary cap books, and Holiday looks like the player that can recoup the most value back for Boston while clearing up a little bit of money as well. And if that trade does end up going down, you know we'll have you covered here at Celtics Today. We have 52,000 diehard C's fans who lock us in as our number one spot for Celtics content all offseason long. So make that a part of your day as well. Subscribe to the channel and turn your notifications on so if and when Jrue Holiday gets moved, you will be notified and you'll have all the latest information. All right, let's talk about Jrue Holiday and a new team emerging in the sweepstakes potentially in his trade market this offseason. If you've seen this photo that we have up on screen, maybe you could deduce the team that we are talking about. As Brian Robb, Celtics insider over at MassLive, talked about this new team emerging. He said, Holiday is expected to be pursued by several teams on the trade market, and a league source tells MassLive that the Los Angeles Clippers are one team expected to show interest in the 34-year-old guard this offseason. And Rob also discussed the fact that the Celtics outbid the Los Angeles Clippers for Jrue Holiday back when they traded for him in 2023. Remember, Damian Lillard was traded to the Milwaukee Bucks, and Holiday was sent over to Portland. He was kind of like a low-hanging fruit. We didn't know exactly what the sweepstakes would be, and the Celtics kind of swooped in and got the X factor to them winning a championship in 2024 by not giving up all that much, with Malcolm Brogdon's health being uncertain, Robert Williams also a player who was not always available out there night in and night out, plus 2 first-round picks. That got Holiday over to Boston. But is this same type of return going to be seen 2 seasons later with Holiday on a new contract extension? It's pretty unlikely at this point. But maybe the Celtics could see some assets back that can help them now, maybe even help them later down the line while clearing up some money on their books. We know they have to get out of the second apron. And the Clippers make a lot of sense as a Jrue Holiday suitor. Look, they're a team that needs to improve this offseason. They need to get, just more smart basketball players in town, guys who make winning plays, guys who make the right plays, and guys who have been there and done that. Holiday's a 2-time champ, and the Clippers, they're not in a spot where they're going to be able to use draft capital to get a new talent over to LA. Like, Holiday is a player who might not require the outgoing team to send out future draft assets. The Clippers don't have a lot of them, and they still need to improve their roster. So with Holiday being a veteran player, their ability to trade for him with some money, it makes a lot of sense for the Clippers to be a suitor in a Jrue Holiday trade. More from Brian Robb here, saying the Clippers don't have many paths to make major upgrades to their roster this offseason with a depleted draft stash as they try to maximize their team around Kawhi Leonard and James Harden in their mid-30s. Holiday's contract at 3 years, $104 million left, could be an obstacle to completing any deal, since that would be a lot of long-term money for the Clippers to take on for an aging player. However, the framework for a possible trade is fairly simple to put together from a money standpoint. Look, the Clippers, they're probably able to make this deal happen because they have Kawhi Leonard, they have a James Harden. Those are 2 players who don't seem to be moving. There's reports coming out that Harden is going to be staying in Los Angeles, whether or not he declines his player option or not. But outside of those 2 big deals, they have a good number of movable contracts on their roster at this point. If you look at what the Clippers have on their books, and I decided not to include Kawhi or Harden because they're not really realistic in this scenario, Norman Powell makes $20.5 million. Now, he outscored his contract this season, so that is certainly something that I don't know if the Clippers are going to be willing to give up in a Holiday deal per se. I think Norman Powell at that figure is probably the more valuable asset than Jrue. They're going to want to keep him around to be a plus scorer. Zubac at $18 million might be one of the best value contracts in the NBA. They're not going to think about really getting rid of him for that number. Bogdanovic is a name that we're going to talk about in a little bit at $16 million. Sharpshooter, guy who can move without the basketball and make some plays for himself. Derrick Jones Jr., the Celtics know him very well from kind of cooking his ass in the 2024 NBA Finals. He makes $10 million. And then Chris Dunn, a familiar name for Celtics fans, back pre-2016 draft and 2021 where they had him for a short time and then dealt him away at $5.4 million. So some movable assets, and anything after that is going to be under 5.4 mil. So coming up next, and now I guess we're going to go through some Jrue Holiday and Los Angeles Clippers trade ideas, because Brian Robb did project a potential Clippers trade framework in a article that he released a couple of weeks ago. And we have some new trade ideas surrounding LA as well. So one that is probably a little bit more realistic, but one that brings back a good amount of value back for Boston. And granted, they might have to give up a little bit of draft capital to do so. But the constant in both trades, like I kind of just alluded to, is going to be Bogdanovic at that $16 million price point. Look, he's 32 years old, but the Celtics are clearly going to need some sort of additional scoring output next season with Jason Tatum on the sidelines. Like, they're not a team that anybody believes at this point to be completely rebuilding. The Celtics are going to want to make improvements around the margins while trying to get some money off of their books. And Bogdanovic is a player that can do that. He's shown as, kind of a consistent line of success over the past couple of seasons. Is a guy who can come out off of the bench and give you 15 points on any given night. Some nights where he'll have a 25, 30-point game for you. And, like, the Celtics are going to need those opportunities next season. He's a above league average three-point shooter, even though he kind of dipped this past year at 36.3%. But this guy can shoot the ball, and he shoots a pretty high volume. Throughout his career, he's gotten up, like, on an average of 5, 6, 7, so even sometimes 8 threes a night. And in 24-25, it wasn't his best year from beyond the arc, but he still put up very respectable numbers. And for a Celtics team that is going to pride themselves on the three-point shooting, like, Bogdanovic kind of fits their system pretty seamlessly. He can get up a bunch. Catch and shoot threes, 38%. Pretty respectable number there. Pull-up threes, who's actually very good, only on 40 attempts, but 37.5% there. That's above average. 37% from the corner isn't necessarily great, but he'll be fine. I'm sure he'll have a lot more open looks in Boston than he would elsewhere. And then above the break, he was 36% three-point shooter, 36.3%. Nothing too crazy up there. He took a bunch. He would take even more in Boston, from what I presume. So the trade idea that we're going to go with first is going to be the one where I'm seeking a little bit more value back from the Los Angeles Clippers, and it's going to go as follows. Bogdanovic comes to Boston along with two other guys that we saw on that list, Derrick Jones Jr. and Chris Dunn. And this deal would clear up potentially up to $10.1 million, granted that you move Derrick Jones Jr. elsewhere after the trade or involve a third team in the deal. So at the moment, like in a vacuum, this deal only clears up less than $1 million for the C's. But if you end up trading Derrick Jones Jr. away to a team that can absorb the money, or maybe to get some draft assets back as you send away the 28th overall pick in this year's draft, like maybe it makes sense to do that and clear up close to $10 million while getting a player in Bogdanovic you can play, and Chris Dunn, who I think is going to fit right into Boston as the backup ball handler. Look, Jrue Holiday carried a decent bit of usage with the Celtics over these past two seasons, and Chris Dunn really saw an elevated role in Los Angeles this past year. He saw a lot of minutes in the postseason, and granted, his offensive limitations made him kind of unplayable down the stretch in some games, but he's probably not going to be asked to close every instance for Boston next season. Like, Peyton Pritchard and Derek White can do that job just fine, and then for certain matchups, Chris Dunn is a player who you can just deploy as that backup guy and a solid ball handler as well. He is 31 years old, so not too old yet, and doesn't have a ton of tread on the tires. I feel like he hasn't been utilized as a really high-usage player over these last few seasons, so maybe he's got some more energy left, and I think he would fit in as a good point-of-attack defender in Boston. But Brian Robb's trade idea that kind of gets the Celtics back a little less value and is at the end of the day a probably more realistic outcome is this, with Bogdanovic coming over to the Celtics along with Drew Eubanks and Jordan Miller. And I'm not going to lie, neither of those guys look to be impact players whatsoever, in my opinion. But you're guaranteed to clear up a lot more money with this deal, $9.4 million off the rip. You don't have to worry about getting a third team involved or rerouting DJJ elsewhere. However, Brian Robb suggested this. I'm not so sure. It is close money-wise. I put this into Fanspo to see if it just cleanly works, and it doesn't exactly. So maybe they'll have to make a modification elsewhere. Maybe Chris Dunn can get included in this package in some capacity instead of Eubanks, who makes a little bit less than the 5.4 figure that Chris Dunn makes. So I wouldn't even be that mad if the Celtics didn't get Derrick Jones Jr. back in the deal. It would just be unfortunate because they wouldn't be able to get value for him sending him elsewhere. But pick a trade out of the two ideas that we just went over on today's show. I'm assuming a lot of you guys are going to be typing your ones down in the chat for the one that includes Derrick Jones Jr. But the Celtics do have to give up a first-round pick, number 28 overall in this year's draft in the deal. So if you want this trade idea, type 1. If you want the second one, where we just talked about, where there's draft compensation involved, this is Brian Robb's idea. He did not specify on exactly what Boston would send away, but I cannot imagine it would be a first-round pick unprotected in this scenario. So type 2 if you would rather be a little more risk-averse, not sending away as much first-round draft capital in this deal, but not getting DJJ back in the package. All right, to close out today's show, I want to talk about another team that is having reported interest in Jrue Holiday, and that's the Dallas Mavericks. And I saw an article today that said that the Mavericks might be potentially out on a deal with the Celtics making a trade for Holiday at this point. And it comes from Bob Ryan, longtime Boston columnist who everybody knows at this point for his yellow teeth on around the horn. Love Bob. He's the classic old-timer Big J, and here's what he had to say on the Mavericks potentially trading for Holiday. He said, to me, I don't think the Mavs are close. Of course, they're going to have Cooper Flagg. We assume with the first pick and Anthony Davis, if he is healthy, then sure, he's wonderful. In my mind, there's probably other teams that would make sense that are closer to doing something. I could see any smart team wanting Jrue Holiday. And look, that isn't by any means like an insider report or anything coming from the Mavs front office saying that they're not interested. But to be fair, Bob Ryan is a longtime journalist in this business, and he wouldn't just say this for no reason. Like, he has to have some sort of basis for the claim. And the more and more I think about it, is it necessarily the most likely thing that the Mavs end up trading for Jrue Holiday? Probably not. Who knows if the Celtics are going to want the value back that Dallas could give if it's only Daniel Gafford and a couple of, lower level salary guys that makes the money work. I'd probably rather have a Bogdanovic as somebody who can really fill up the stat sheet in the scoring department a little bit more than Gafford can next season. But that will do it for the end of today's show. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel, because if anything happens with Holiday, or if we hear that a new team is involved in the rumors as far as trading for him go, we will bring you a video right here on the channel. So lock us in, youtube.com/CelticsTV. We'll see you guys all in the next one. And as always, let's go C's.